Hey guys, welcome to my channel. I hope you're all doing very well. So, I just watched Avatar: The Last Airbender. Let's talk about it. So Avatar: The Last Airbender is of course the Netflix live action adaptation of the classic, extremely popular and extremely highly regarded animated series from back in the day. Now when this series was first announced, it was met with some excitement as well as trepidation because the animated series has such a special place in so many people's hearts. So people were nervous about what Netflix would do to this prized possession. But this Thursday, after all of the rumors, after all of the sneak peeks, the trailers, the special posters, we finally got a chance to see what this Netflix live action adaptation of the famous animated series looked like. And from what I saw, a lot of fans had mixed to negative feelings about this adaptation. And on Thursday, me going into watching this series, planning to binge watch the whole thing on the Thursday evening, I was a little bit anxious, I was a little bit nervous, I didn't know what to expect. But guys, I have to say, I am going to throw out the words of the naysayers. I'm going to ignore them, shut my doors, close my windows, because here in this household, we had a fun time. We had a fun time watching the Avatar live action remake. I really enjoyed the series. I don't know what everyone else is talking about. And quite frankly, I don't care. I'm sick and tired. I'm sick and tired of all of these negative reactions, especially from twitter.com, okay? I'm tired of it. I'm prepared to make up my own mind now more than ever before. Having said all of this though, there is a very important disclaimer that I have to make before we dive in, and that is that, hi, I'm Jean, and I have never watched the animated Avatar: The Last Airbender series. That, I think, is a very important disclaimer for me to make, because lots of the people that were disappointed by this live action remake were huge fans of the original animated show. But I have to say, after watching this live action remake and enjoying it so much, I'm willing to give Avatar another try. I'm willing to give it another go, because I do believe that it is a spectacular show. I mean, it's so highly regarded and so highly rated. So I do think there's something there. Perhaps I was just not in the right mood to receive Avatar. But for today, we are going to be diving into the live action series by Netflix. So if that sounds fun to you, then keep on watching. And also, if you haven't already, please be sure to subscribe to my channel and make sure you turn on your notifications so that you can be told when I upload next. Now without further ado guys, let's get into this! So Avatar: The Last Airbender is of course the epic story of this world that is made up of these 4 kingdoms, each of which represents the 4 natural elements: earth, wind, fire and water. I had to remember for a second there. By the way, my finger is blue because of eyeshadow. I'm not dying or anything, like it's not frostbite, it's just eyeshadow. Anyways, but as you can see, I am representing the water nation for today. But originally, all 4 nations coexisted in harmony, each playing their part in the natural balance, the natural order. And this balance was maintained by the presence of an avatar. And this was this mixture of a human yet spiritual being that was reincarnated time and time again. And there was a cycle that would play out. So at one point, the avatar would be from the fire nation, and then they would be from the water nation, and then the air, and then the land, and then it would cycle back again. And when this story begins, the previous avatar was called Kyoshi, and she was of the earth nation, and she was an incredible, powerful Avatar. She was one of the, no, she was the most badass Avatar that we were introduced to on this series. Like, I loved Kyoshi, okay? All the other Avatars are fine. She was the one though. Kyoshi was so powerful, in fact, that she found a way to prolong her own life, living up to 230 years before she finally passed away. Now, naturally, when she passed away, the soul of the Avatar would be reincarnated into someone else, but there seemed to be a bit of a gap that time, and unfortunately there were some evil forces in the Fire Nation, including the Fire Lord guy, who saw this as an opportunity to colonize the rest of the nations, and so began the rule of terror by the Fire Nation as they took over the other nations, destroyed many of the lands, and killed many of the benders. Now, in each of the lands you had these very special individuals that were imbued with these bending powers. For instance, those in the Water Nation had water benders, those in the Earth Nation had earth benders, fire benders, and air benders. But what was special about the Avatar is that they were able to use all of these powers. So they were imbued with the earth, fire, air, and water powers all in one, making them a very powerful individual. But in the absence of that power came the opportunity that the Fire Nation were waiting for, and unfortunately they were successful in destroying much of this world. But just when all hope was lost, we finally got the arrival of another Avatar in the form of Aang, who is just 12 years old, and he is of the Air Nation. He is being trained by monks when we're first introduced to him, and he's just this like silly happy-go-lucky kid who's, you know, kind of not taking his studies too seriously, but he has this really cool mentor who he has a really great connection with, but he still has a lot to learn because he's 12 because he's an adorable 12-year-old kid, so like get off his back, okay? But unfortunately he has to take on more responsibilities than a 12-year-old should ever have to think about, because it does turn out that he is the Avatar, and just when he is told this information, the worst happens. The Fire Nation attacks the Air Nation, and they end up wiping out all of the monks, all of the sanctuary, and Aang ends up all alone as he is thrust into this icicle to be frozen Captain America style for a whole century. So a century later, he is finally found amongst the southern tribes of the Water Nation, I think they are. I'm still learning, by the way. I've got Wikipedia open as we speak. But he is discovered 100 years later in, again, classic Steve Rogers style. And when he awakens, he's like, what's going on? Where am I? He doesn't realize that all of that time has passed. And he is shocked to discover the chaos and havoc and madness that the Fire Nation has wreaked across the world in their lust for power. But thankfully, young Aang is in good hands, because the person who discovers him is the young and inexperienced waterbender Katara, and she and her brother Sokka are basically in charge of their little tribe after the Fire Nation wreaked havoc on them as well, killing all but one, waterbenders from their land. And so they are very vulnerable, they don't have much protection, and any bending of any sort is forbidden in order to dissuade any attention from the Fire Nation. But Katara can't help herself. She is a waterbender, as she does try to practice as much as she can in secret. But when Katara and Sokka discover Aang, it sets them off onto this journey of discovery and adventure and fighting and fear and learning. And so all sorts of chaos and friendship and madness ensues. So that is the setup of the animated but also the live action series of Avatar: The Last Airbender. First of all, I want to dive into the good. I want to dive into the reason why I really liked this series, and starting off with the story. I just became really enthralled by it. I think the world building was done so well. I love it when you have a world, a fantastical world that has its own unique characteristics wherever you go. And the fact that each of these worlds are based on the natural elements certainly helps. But even then, there were worlds that were based on the same elements. For instance, the southern tribe versus the northern tribe, but they were also very unique in their characterizations. You see how the southern tribe is very small and very interconnected. They have to fend for themselves. They seem to be very separated from everyone else. And it's just Sokka in charge, like inexplicably. It's just Sokka in charge of everything, which makes no goddamn sense. Whereas when you go to the northern tribe, they are very organized, very hierarchical. They are also quite isolated, but it's a defense mechanism. And they have their very strict society with its laws and traditions, some of which are a little bit misogynistic. We'll get into that later. So even though they are both water-based nations, you still see the two unique kind of personalities and characteristics that they have, which I really appreciated. Now, most of this praise definitely goes to the animated series, which did such a good job of setting up this world to begin with. So I will definitely admit that. But the fact that it translated so well to live action is certainly something worth praising. Another thing that I really loved about the story was this kind of seamless immersion between these human characters versus these like mythological creatures. I loved how they incorporated all of that in a way that felt very natural to this world. Like, it didn't seem bizarre. For instance, there were scenes where where people were on carriages, and at first, for some reason, I must have blinked or something, I thought these were horse-drawn carriages. But no, these carriages were being driven by these like eagle bird creatures, and it was just the most normal thing in the world. It was just the most casual thing, like, yeah, this happens every single day. The world itself felt very immersive, very natural, and all of the different elements to it just felt like they belonged. They did a really brilliant job of bringing this story to life. Now, that's not to say that there weren't some issues, okay? That's not to say that I don't have some critiques, which we'll get into in the latter half of the review. But first of all, I want to dive into the characters and each of their story arcs real quick, starting off with our main protagonist, Aang. First of all, I have to say Gordon Komiya was just magnifique as Aang. This little kid was perfection. Although if Netflix is going to give us a season 2, they best hurry up, because that little kid is gonna shoot up. That little kid is gonna grow up so fast. So if you still want him to be adorable 12-year-old Aang in season 2, 3, and 4, you need to start shooting now. And we better get a season 2, 3, and I don't know about 4, but Netflix, you better renew this show. But Gordon Komiya was absolutely brilliant. He was super charming, super charismatic, really likable, but also relatable. And I did see that people wanted Aang to be a little bit goofier. This is something that I remember about the character when I used to watch glimpses of the animated series. And this is going to be a very unpopular opinion, but listen, apparently this is the year of unpopular opinions, so I'm just going to stand in my truth. One of the reasons why I never connected with the animated series is because I kind of found Aang annoying. I kind of found Aang annoying as hell. Like, goofy Aang, super goofy Aang was just never my tea. I don't know what it is about it. Again, I'm going to try and give this series another go. But me personally, okay, I do prefer Gordon Komiya's interpretation of this character to the animated version. I found him to be too goofy, corny, and annoying in the animated series. I'm sorry. So yeah. And in terms of this story, I found it to be really heartening. Here you have this young 12-year-old kid who's just woken up 100 years in the future and everything's gone to crap. Literally everything has gone to crap. The craziest, worst nightmares have all come true. The Fire Nation have wreaked havoc across the world, and he is supposed to be the Avatar, but everyone believes him to have abandoned people when they needed him most, and now he has so much to prove as the Avatar, but also so much to learn, because because he hadn't even begun his avatar training when the invasion started. So it is such a compelling story for this character to have. As far as the chosen one characters go, I think Aang has one of the more compelling stories, and I don't tend to be drawn to chosen one storylines, but his is really, really cool. And it's because it is full of conflict and is full of insecurity. Like, he's not sure of himself, he doesn't know what he's doing, as he keeps saying, and it's not his fault, it's just how things fell. And the series does a really great job of diving into Aang's psyche, especially when he gets to communicate with the previous avatars. I think that is such a nice touch, the fact that he is able to seek counsel from them, and they have a variety of reactions to him, okay, and a variety of different advice that they have to offer him. I love the fact that he learns different things from different avatars, and also sometimes the avatars are like wrong. Sometimes the avatar's advice isn't good, like it's garbage, okay, like that man who had the bear man, okay, he wasn't particularly helpful at all in the slightest. And so Aang kind of has to cherry pick the good advice, the stuff that is going to help him, and leave behind some of the stuff that's just not as relevant to him or true to his personality. Because as Bearman points out, each of them are different and unique. He isn't Kyoshi and Aang isn't Bearman, and so they kind of have to follow their own path, but at least they can tap into that sort of ancestry so they can get the guidance that they need. Now, being an avatar is already exciting enough, but another important element to Aang's character is, of course, the fact that he is the last Airbender. And I don't think enough people are making a big enough deal about this. People just don't react as dramatically as they need to, considering the fact that this is the first Airbender that has been seen in 100 years. The fact that Aang is the last Airbender, to me, is a bigger deal than the fact that he's an avatar, because avatars come and go. Like, we literally saw a whole lineage of them in the series, but there will be no more Airbenders once Aang is gone. Like, the Airbenders have they're gone. Am I the only one who's like freaking out over there? Like, there's no more airbenders anymore. That's crazy. For instance, in the penultimate episode where they go to the northern tribe of waterbenders, and the water folks are super excited to see Aang because they're like, yes, we have the avatar, he will help defend us against the Fire Nation. But then when Aang explains very honestly that he wasn't properly trained and he doesn't actually know how to use the other elements, they're all disappointed and like tutting and rolling their eyes and looking him up and down, giving him the side eye. Oh, I guess you're of no use to us after all. And I'm like, hold up. hold up, because you have a land full of waterbenders and this is the last Airbender. Like, why are we not, what's not clicking? He's the last Airbender. Even if he hasn't mastered the other elements yet, the fact of the matter is you're not going to get another Airbender in your sights ever again. So maybe show him some respect and also learn how to use your powers together. So at the very least, you have 2 of the 4 elements working on your side. But anywho, with that revelation that all of the other Airbenders are gone, it brings a lot of loneliness and solitude to the character of Aang. And so it's really wonderful to see that he is able to make a connection with Katara and Sokka and build a friendship with them, because he really is on his own and it's quite heartbreaking. And you even see when he visits the spirit world that he gets a chance to hang out with his old mentor once more, and you just see that sadness, that pathos that really hits hard, because he knows he will never have his community of airbenders ever again. So yeah, overall I would say Aang's storyline was one of the strongest of the entire series, thankfully, because he is the main protagonist. They did a spectacular job of building this character, allowing him to build these connections with other people, even if they are 100 years past his time. And then you have that season finale where he makes the ultimate sacrifice, and sacrifice has been a recurring theme throughout the series, but he makes that sacrifice to become is it the moon? or is it the river or something? He gives himself over to the spirit world entirely in the hopes of saving the waterbenders, and thankfully he is able to come back from that. But you know, that was, like I said, the ultimate sacrifice that he could have made, showing that he really was ready to step up to be the Avatar, even though he didn't have all of the answers, even though he didn't know everything yet. He had that spirit, he was willing to step up, and that was a huge moment for the character. Okay, so next character down we've got is Katara, my sister. Look, my sister. My sister Katara. Katara is a G. What can I say? Katara is amazing. I loved her, and I love the way that Kiawentio portrays her. I think she is so adorable. I think she's so likable. She also goes through a really interesting arc where she was also the last of her kind in her village. She was the last waterbender of the southern tribe, and so that was also very isolating for her, and that's some way that she can kind of connect and relate to Aang. But unlike Aang, who was taught by these powerful masters and monks, she never had any formal training, and so she was just trying to figure things out on her own, and all in secrecy, because the Fire Nation was looking out for any other benders from that tribe, because they had already wiped out the rest. But when the opportunity comes to go on this adventure with Aang and take down the Fire Nation, she's eager to take this opportunity, not just because obviously the Fire Nation sucks, like the Fire Nation needs to be taken down, but also because she wants the chance to learn how to master her powers. And with each adventure that they went on, and with each land that they visited, I loved how we got to see her kind of take these little lessons on board, especially with the Earth folks. The Earth Nation, the way they use their powers is so cool, and sis was definitely able to learn a couple of tricks from the Earth people, and she was able to, you know, adapt that to her waterbending powers, which was sick. And this culminated in the penultimate episode where she met some other waterbenders for the first time and was able to learn a lot about how they use their powers, except there was a cultural difference, because there women aren't allowed to fight, they aren't allowed in combat, they are expected to be healers and more, you know, passive users of their powers, and she disapproved of this. Now I will say this storyline to me felt a little bit rushed, and we'll talk about rushing later down the line when we talk about my critiques, but this storyline was definitely a victim of this feeling, because it just felt so quick and it didn't feel as earned as it could have been had they taken a little bit more time to set up this storyline. For instance, early on in the episode, Katara gets to meet this really powerful master who's a woman who teaches people how to heal with their waterbending powers, and she teaches her like one little tiny lesson, and Katara gets started on that, and then she turns around and she's like, right, when are we going to get to the combat? And the lady's like, no, women don't do that around these parts. And I feel like that switch up was just so quick. We could have really mellowed that out and seen her explore these healing abilities a little bit more, because let's not forget, healing is quite important too, Katara. My sister, okay, like healing people is actually pretty cool, so maybe we learn that lesson first of all and then we get into the combat. But unfortunately the script didn't really allow for Katara to properly learn how to heal people before advancing onto combat skills, and so it just felt very quick and a little bit unearned when she is hailed as a master in her own right. So that was a clumsily executed element to Katara's otherwise a really compelling story arc throughout this series. But overall, Katara was definitely one of the strongest characters of the entire series, exploring her background and the fact that her mother died trying to protect her, and her becoming the only waterbender in her tribe but unable to help or use her powers because of the Fire Nation's surveillance, and then her finally having the opportunity to learn how to use these gifts and taking that with both hands and becoming so powerful in her own right. That was just wonderful stuff. And on top of it all, you have Kiawentio, who's just brilliant in this role and just perfectly cast for this character. Okay, so next up in my lineup of favorites, we have Dallas Liu as Prince Zuko. Prince Zuko. I remember people talking about Prince Zuko when they were watching the animated series, and I was like, what's the big deal about Prince Zuko? Now I understand. Now I understand, because I am ride or die for Prince Zuko. I want Zuko and Aang to be best friends. Do not spoil anything. Do not spoil anything in the comments. I don't know what happened. And this is also something that brings me a thrill. Like, this is also why I'm really excited about this live action series, because I do not know what happens. I didn't watch the animated series, so I'm generally going in blind, and all I know is in my mind, Zuko and Aang need to be best buddies. They need to be back. And the scenes that they had together were just magnifique. But Prince Zuko, man, justice for Prince Zuko, man. Justice for Prince Zuko. His dad sucks. His dad sucks so much. But seriously though, what can I say about Prince Zuko's storyline? I mean, this is a young kid who has been trained, battered, bruised, okay, by his father to one day become the heir to the Fire Lord's throne, except his father doesn't actually have any real faith in him. And the one time where he stood up to his father and actually expressed his ideas to the War Council, his father punished him for that brutally, publicly humiliating him, bashing him with his fire powers, and then it finished off with the branding on his actual eye. And so here you have a Prince Zuko who has been traumatized by his own blood, and to make matters worse, his father then exiled him, okay, sending him on this impossible suicide mission, mind you, to find the Avatar, this all-powerful being that would surely kill his son. And he knew this in the back of his mind. And so Zuko sets out on this suicide mission to find the Avatar, and it becomes all that he can think about in his one-track mind. He needs to find the Avatar, bring him back to the Fire Nation, to his father's feet, so he can finally get his father's respect and recognition. Except that would never happen, because the guy is a madman. But even though I have great sympathy for Zuko, because all of these characters are really complex and very well written, there are also times when he gets on my nerves. Like, there are also times when Zuko is acting like a spoiled brat, especially towards the army fighting for him. And in those times, he's just like a 17-year-old bratty prince, okay, telling people what to do, insulting them. And so it makes sense when they're willing to go against him, because they've been treated like crap by him. And so he deserves to have that mutiny. But the cherry on top of this Zuko sundae is his relationship with General Iroh. Their father-son relationship was, oh my god, there were times where I was tearing up, guys. There were times when I was tearing up. Uncle Iroh loves that kid like he is his own. Uncle Iroh lost his own son to this pointless war, and so he has grown very disenchanted with it all. But at the very least, he wants to be there for his nephew, especially after he witnessed how his horrible brother treated his own son. And considering the fact that he lost his own son, you know, seeing his brother treat his son that way, it's like, sir, you have a child, you have a son, and you're treating him like that. And so Iroh said, enough is enough. Let me take him under my own wing. And so he's been this advisor, mentor, father figure for Zuko, and it is just such a wonderful relationship to witness. Now, Iroh himself is a bit of a grey area character once again, because there are times when you do see that he has grown disenchanted with the regime of the Fire Nation and his brother's insatiable thirst for power. But then there are also times where he kind of has that like evil streak of his own that reminds you that he was once the first general of the nation. So like, he can't be messed around with entirely. He can be deceptively approachable when he's talking about tea and sweets and snacks, but there's this other side to him that reminds you that he is the Fire Lord's brother. Also, Dallas Liu had amazing on-screen chemistry with Gordon Cormier, who of course was portraying Aang, and like I said, I want them to be best friends in the end. Don't tell me if they do become friends, okay? I want it to be a surprise. but I hope they do because they share so much in common. They're both burdened by great expectations, and they even discuss this in one of the latter episodes where Aang is opening up to Zuko, but he just will not allow himself to open up to Aang, even though there are moments, there are sparks of the friendship that they could have, the alliance that they could have, but he's just so oppressed by his father and the 3 years that he spent looking for this guy that he just will not let it go yet. Hopefully in the future he will though. Hopefully what we'll get eventually is a sort of Ben 10, Kevin 11 friendship. Like that's what I want. That's what I want for the long term. And also if we want to talk about long term, Katara and Zuko, listen. You guys know I'm the queen of shipping, and if this is like a 10-year-old ship and you guys are like, girl, you're just now arriving to this party, then just let me have my fun, okay? Because like I said, I don't know what's gonna happen, but in my mind, in my shipping brain, Katara and Zuko maybe, question mark. Let's just put a pin in that one. And lastly, my list of favorite characters, we have Princess Azula, portrayed by Elizabeth Yu. Now apparently there were quite a few changes made to this character for this first season. Like apparently they show their hand with this character much sooner than they do in the original series, and I think that makes sense because most of the viewers of this live action remake will have already known what's going to happen, so they don't need to drag it out for as long. For me personally, as a newcomer to all of this, it still also made sense because it gave us yet another character in the Fire Nation to get invested in. So yeah, I was happy with what seems to be quite a few changes when it comes to this character, and we still haven't seen a lot from her, so I think they did a good job of building her up for the next season. But the reason why I brought her up here is, first of all, the whole time I saw her this season, I kept referring to her as Arya. She was giving strong Arya vibes. Strong Arya vibes, although she's evil Arya. Although Arya herself had flitted between good and evil throughout Game of Thrones, but she just reminded me so strongly of Arya. So that's number one. And number two, of course, is when you have that moment, that scene where her father is putting her through yet another trial, okay, trying to get her to prove herself, and she said, enough is enough. My girl put her foot down and she raised up her palms and electricity fired out, and it was like, ooh, what? What is going on? So sis has unlocked a whole new power skill, which is very exciting. I can't wait to see what comes of it in the following season. And then of course, reason number 3 is where we have that ending where whilst Zuko and Aang and everyone else was busy with the northern tribe of the waterbenders, sis, okay, little sis, was out here raising an army against the Earth Nation. And what was admittedly a very clever move for the Fire Lord. Now I will say a weak point of her storyline was when it was revealed that she was liaising with Zhao and she was guiding him the entire time, and that's why he was able to make some formidable moves of his own. I think it would have been more effective had we seen more of that correspondence throughout the series, but we just got a couple of examples of that near the beginning, and then throughout the show I guess it's supposed to be presumed that he's helping her out, but they lost the thread on that just a little bit, so it didn't really feel like she was fully in control of Zhao's actions throughout the course of the show. And whilst we're on the topic of critiques, let's dive into some of the other ones that I had. You may have noticed that one key character that was missing from my fave characters list was of course Sokka, and that's because he annoyed the hell out of me. Yup. He annoyed the hell out of me. For the most part, I wasn't the biggest fan of Sokka. I didn't mind him when he was with the gang, like when it was the trio of besties. I thought he was okay. But what annoyed me about him was, first of all, the allegations of the actor apparently faking his race to be in this show. What? Okay, we're putting a pin on that for a second. Number 2, within the story itself, I just got really annoyed by the little mini love stories that they kept giving him. Boo! Like, it was okay enough when he fell in love with that warrior girl from the Earth Nation. Like, that was like, okay, fine. You know, he's fallen in love with her. It all happened so fast. Again, we'll talk about fastness in a second. But it all happened so fast and it just wasn't convincing. They didn't have great chemistry together. It felt so forced. Like, it was just like, whoa, what's going on? All of a sudden he fell in love out of nowhere. And that was bad enough. But then they did the exact same thing in the penultimate episode where he goes to the waterbending nation and he falls in love with that fox spirit, the not kitsune. And it's just like, we're doing this again? Seriously? And she had a whole man. Like, she had a whole man that she was originally betrothed to. And that guy seemed so nice and so caring. But she was like, no to him and yes to Sokka. And I'm like, really? That makes no goddamn sense. So yeah, I didn't love that aspect of the character, but like I said, he was manageable when he was interacting with the other two gang. Like when he was with Aang and Katara, things were working well. When he was left on his own, to his own devices, I was like, oh, what's going on here? Although I will say that little storyline that he had in Omashu, where he hung out with Danny Pudi's Sai, or the inventor, that was secretly liaising with the Fire Nation. I thought that was a really cool storyline for him. Once again, he meets someone who acts as a father figure to him. After he lost his own father, who was previously the leader of the Southern tribe and apparently didn't even believe in him and was disappointed by him. So he's dealing with a lot himself, and the fact that he was able to connect with the inventor was really touching, because he was able to tap into another skill set that he never knew he had, because it wasn't really harnessed when he was thrown into the position of being the leader of the Southern tribe himself, even though that makes no goddamn sense because clearly that's not who he's supposed to be. But now we've gone through the main characters, I do want to touch on some other critiques that I had of the series, and this is one that I kept mentioning. But first of all, we have to talk about the pacing. I think one of the major issues that the series has is that it just feels like it's going so quickly, and I suspect it's because they're trying to jam in a lot of the story in 8 episodes of a first season. The original series only had 3 seasons. I was shocked to discover, but each of the seasons had like 20 episodes. So the pacing of the animated series was very different. I remember I watched about 10 episodes of the first season and the story is kind of dribbled out little by little. It's very much stretched out so that you don't feel like everything is being rushed or thrown at you all at once. But this adaptation definitely feels like that. Unfortunately, they're trying to cover a lot of ground in a short space of time, and it does the story a disservice oftentimes. So yeah, overall, I would say that the biggest issue that the series has is the pacing and the fact that they have so much ground to cover in just 8 one-hour episodes. I think that was the biggest thing that hampered the story. But I do think they did a pretty good job despite this. Like I said, I can't give you a direct comparison to the animated series. I don't know how egregious these differences are in comparison to the original. But as a newcomer, as a first-time viewer of this franchise, I have to say that whilst I definitely noticed these pacing issues, for the most part, they didn't inhibit me from enjoying the series. And lastly, another glaring problem that the series had sometimes was the special effects. Now listen, even though there were times where the special effects looked particularly egregious when people were flying or using their powers, especially when they had close-ups of people, like it did look very wonky CGI wise. But listen, I don't want to harp on too much about this, okay, because we've been talking about bad CGI in these $200 million plus blockbuster movies for the last few years, but this little Netflix series that could okay, this series did a pretty damn good job with this CGI. Like, I have to give it a round of applause. I have to tip my hat off to I have to tip my wig off to them because they smashed it for the most part when it came to the special effects. This entire show is special effects. Like, this entire series is green screen, CGI CGI, special effects, like none of this is real. None of this is real, and it looks amazing for the most part. Again, when it's wonky, it's really wonky, but I'm still really impressed with what this Netflix series was able to accomplish. Now, even though I'm definitely side-eyeing those $200 million plus blockbusters, there's still no denying that this series cost everything. Like if I was talking to Netflix and I was like, man, this looks good, and Netflix was like, thank you, and I'm like, what did it cost? And they'd be like, everything. Every goddamn thing. Now I'm starting to understand why Netflix was cancelling shows left, right and center. This is why we didn't get a Shadow and Bone season 3, mind you. Like this series is to blame, because this show must have cost them an arm and a leg. They truly invested in this series, and I couldn't help but think, like, damn, if only Percy Jackson if only Percy Jackson had gotten this money from Disney. But Disney knows better than to do this, okay? Because this is crazy. But good for the Avatar team. They definitely benefited from this gargantuan budget, and the series overall looked brilliant. Not just the CGI, but also, I mean, you guys know me, the hair, the makeup, the costuming. I was looking at images of the original series and just seeing the comparisons between the two, especially with how they, you know, actualize these characters. I just thought it was magnifique. It was so well done. You could tell that talented people put all of their effort onto this show to bring the world of Avatar to life, and I think, again, for the most part, they were very successful in doing so. And finally, before I go, my last critique of the series would be that, in my opinion, the first half was definitely stronger than the second. Not even the first half. I think the first 5 episodes were definitely stronger, and then episodes 6 to 8 kind of floundered just a little bit for me, especially episode 6, where you had that spirit world situation. That wasn't my favorite. And then the finale, even though I thought it was really powerful in terms of Aang's character arc, I think the execution was a little bit messy and confusing, and I didn't quite understand what was going on and why, and it certainly didn't help that it felt very much accelerated and fast-paced because of the lack of time to deal with this storyline properly. But guys, overall, I had a really fun time with this series. I seem to have enjoyed it much more than the Avatar fans, and that's okay, because I've never watched the animated series, so I didn't know what to expect, and I was pleasantly surprised. And so with all of that being said, I'm going to be giving Avatar: The Last Airbender a 7.5 out of 10. So that's it from me, guys. Now that I told you guys my thoughts on Avatar: The Last Airbender, it's time for you guys to let me know what you thought of this series down in the comments below. Please be sure to subscribe to catch new videos coming up. Thank you guys so much for watching. I really appreciate it, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye!